The cover-up of a dead priest, final part. In April 1991, 45-year-old Simon Balas, a security guard for a company called Sigurnost, was reported missing. Simon lived on the 20th floor of a skyscraper at Karamanova 4, and when neighbors were questioned they offered conflicting accounts of when he was last seen and the circumstances, with some reporting he was last seen with his mother and others with his brother. Simon was described as withdrawn and often absent from work. He was not overly intimate with his roommates. On May 1, after a foul stench had spread through the staircase of the skyscraper, the police broke down the door to a room and discovered a dead body identified as Simon. The body was heavily decomposed and infested with maggots. Simon was half naked and had his arms tied behind his back. Investigators observed that his apartment was in tatters with various objects scattered about or outright broken, and as for Simon himself, he had a wound to the back of his head and there were signs of strangulation. His body was taken for autopsy, where it was determined that he had been dead for a month and the cause of death was recorded as suffocation. The coroner, however, informed the police that Simon either had consensual sex with or was by another man, with semen samples being recovered. On August 1, 1991, a 68-year-old pensioner named Josip Bernetic was also reported missing, with the neighbors suspecting that he had been dead in his apartment. Josip was married to a woman from Virovitica and before their retirement worked for Jugoplastica, now KK Split. A few days before the report was made, his wife went to their cottage on the island of Zurye and she called home several times, but Josip never answered the phone, which was when she got worried and called their neighbors to inform them about this. Interestingly enough, one of the neighbors was an at the time 30-year-old Doris Dragovic. The police arrived and broke down the locked door to Josip's apartment and found him lying on the ground dead with a broken spine and various blunt force wounds. The murder weapon was determined to be a wooden cutting board. During an autopsy, it was also observed that Josip had either been by or engaged in consensual sex with an unknown male. The police figured that Josip used his wife's vacation as an opportunity to invite the killer into his home. The last confirmed victim, it seems unclear on whether the police consider Peter an isolated incident or not, was a 61-year-old man named Miljenko Stambuk. Miljenko was a renowned ballet dancer and choreographer who was stated to have performed all over the world and was beloved by his community. Miljenko also owned an art gallery. On November 1, 1991, Miljenko was found unresponsive in front of his apartment building in a pool of his own blood. An ambulance was called and he was rushed to a hospital and underwent emergency surgery, but he, unfortunately, passed away from his wounds at the hospital. The police opened a third murder investigation and determined that Miljenko was likely attacked inside but fled before passing out in front of his apartment, which was when the killed gave up on his pursuit due to the risk of being seen. An autopsy determined that Miljenko had sustained several blunt force wounds, with the cause of death being listed as severe brain damage and that there was no hope for survival. It is unknown whether Miljenko also had consensual sex or was but he is labeled as a victim of the unknown serial killer regardless. The police assured the public that they would catch the killer, but they were unable to name even a single suspect. These murders took place in 1991, and that is important because that was the year when the Croatian War of Independence began, with Croatia declaring their independence from Yugoslavia almost 2 months after Simun's death. Right before and during the murders, the city of Split was swarmed by military personnel, the Navy, international peacekeepers, humanitarians, spies and refugees, with the small and underfunded police being overwhelmed by this alone and were not prepared to deal with a serial killer. Something worth noting is that the killer struck every 3 months and always on the first. Due to similar circumstances, many believe that the killer resurfaced after a 4-year hiatus to claim Peter as his next victim before disappearing again. Both Peter's murder and the serial killing case remain unsolved despite the extensive investigation. None of the 500 people questioned proved to be viable suspects. The most recent update from a news article from 2012 which stated that both cases would be reopened and re-examined, but it seems this didn't provide any new leads.